Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 compression mistakes that we all make. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the like button, and of course if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have another video. Plus, of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. So what we decided to do was do this in reverse order. So we're going to start with 5 and lead to number 1. So stick around to the end because I think you'll enjoy it. So in reverse order, number 5, using too fast an attack time. This one you've probably heard quite a few instances before, and I think it's quite valid because if you use an extremely fast attack time, you are going to mess with your transient, especially with, of course, plug-in compressors, which have attack times far faster than any piece of hardware could ever do. Now you can have look-ahead compressors, etc., which basically annihilate that transient immediately. So unless you're specifically trying to grab something and control it, probably like a drum kit, you want to add like a huge amount of energy to a parallel bus, for instance, you might want to grab those transients and squash them in so it's just kind of this squashing kind of aggressive drum sound. That can be done really, really well with a very, very short attack time. However, in most instances, you don't want to do that. You certainly don't want to feature a sound like that unless you're going for that quote-unquote, what people consider to be overly compressed. Personally, I like a little bit of transient coming through, and if I then want to control that transient, I'll put a limiter on it. I'll reach for like an L1 or whatever limiter you like, and then just take the head of that little transient off and just control it. I find myself quite often when I'm recording, for instance, if I'm recording with compression, as I'll use 2 compressors in series. The same thing in mixing. I'll use one to compress, allowing a bit of excitement as the transient comes through, and then I'll use something more aggressively, like something set to 20:1. So maybe in recording, I'll use the DBX 160, and then I'll go into an 1176 set to 20:1. One at 3:1, one at 20:1. This is very, very common with a lot of guys. I remember talking to Eric Valentine, for instance, at NAMM or AES about 4 or 5 years ago. We first started this, and I talked about that combination, and he said it's one he loves as well. Dave Jordan loves it, Mike Klink. A lot of people like that combination of compression lightly, going into limiting, just catching peaks. It's a really nice way of working. I can demonstrate that quickly for you here. Here's an acoustic guitar, and you're going to see me compress it pretty generically. I'm not even adjusting the attack and release time. I'm going where it starts at. It's a pretty aggressive acoustic sound. The release time is set somewhere in the middle. Again, it's just defaulting. I'm not trying anything clever yet. Bypass it. Bring it on. So it's letting a little bit of transient go through and then it's grabbing it. So bringing up some energy of the overall guitar. So it's making it sound just a little bit more exciting. It might actually let the acoustic cut through in the mix a bit because you hear a little bit of that transient. But let's just pretend it's a little excessive on the transient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just a good old-fashioned L1, which is Waves limiter. And I'm just going to use it to catch the peaks. So you're seeing where it says about 6 here? That's where the peaks are jumping. So if I pull this down to about -6, bypass it. It's controlled. So if I really want to control those transients, I don't try and do it with the compressor. I use it with limiting. It's just the way my brain works. And to be honest, it works really, really nicely. Stick to the end here for the number 1 tip, because I think that's going to make a lot of sense out of this. But using fast attacks is great if you're trying to like encompass the whole signal and like make it feel compressed from the get-go. But I try to avoid that unless it's on like parallel sources, like parallel drums, maybe a parallel vocal that's coming up underneath, because I'm just trying to add an even energy underneath. If I really want to control those transients, that's where I reach for a limiter just to shave off the top of that transient. Number 4. Too slow of a release time. This is an interesting one because I watched a video where somebody sort of blanketed this. The reality is you want your release time to be fast enough so it gets out of the way of the next transient, obviously, but you don't want it to be so fast that it's not really working. This is where it gets a little interesting. If we go back to our friend here, the acoustic guitar, like I said, I went to a default setting on that release. See if you can hear what's going on. So I'm going to take a bar here with a couple of like extreme transients, and I'm going to slow down the release time, and let's see how it does. It may hold on to it for just a little bit too long. Again, it is also dependent on the threshold, because if I don't have it catching this second hit here, then it's kind of irrelevant. I'm not worried about it. But you see, I've got this period of time here before the next transient comes up. Slow the release time down. See what's happening here? I mean, you can hear it, and if you want the visual aid, you can see it there, that it's not getting out of the way. That second heavier transient here is basically being annihilated. So we're losing the excitement. So we'll speed it up again. Close, but it's still grabbing a little hard. Somewhere around about there. Now what it's done is it's releasing fast enough that it's allowing the next transient to come in. What I highly recommend when learning how compression works, find percussive things, drum loops, acoustic guitar parts, things that have excessive transients. It's the best way to learn how to use a compressor. I learned purely and simply by taking a drum loop and realizing I could manipulate it to increase the transients and make it sound tighter, so it's like pop, pop, pop. Or I could do the opposite and bring the attack time so short that it was annihilating everything, and then it started to sound more roomy. So it's incredible what you can do with a compressor. So again, I'm illustrating on an acoustic guitar, which is a great example, but you could also do it on a drum loop. So hopefully that showed you why you want to make sure you have the right release time for the instrument that you're compressing. Number 3, compressing for the sake of it. The reality is like, listen to your sources, and are you just opening up a compressor and deciding to use it because you watched a video of somebody like me that is using a compressor? If we look at this mix here, this is a mix I've just did inside of the Academy. There are a lot of tracks that have no plugins on them because the recording was pretty good. But even then, EQ, 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 a compressor, a room mic, an EQ. The point is like there's a lot of things on this drum sound, for instance, that have absolutely no compression on it. It's not even bust to a compressor. And this is the drum sound. That's the point. You don't always have to be looking to compress something. You have to have an end, a reason why. If it's purely and simply just to control gain, think about that. Do you need to control it? Why are you controlling it? Compressors are not only controlling volume and dynamics, they're also providing you with different sounds. As we're talking about the attack and release times, if you let that transient just sneak through, you've got a slow enough time, you can make things more percussive. If you do the opposite and make the attack time so fast, you can grab it early, and it's great for parallel compression underneath a whole drum mix to add just energy of all the drums. So my point is like, why are you reaching for a compressor? Are you using it for a particular reason, or are you just opening it up and putting it on a track? I see that happen so often. If you literally want to just control gain, you could do it with automation. So question, why do you need a compressor before using a compressor? And then if you are going to use one, use it for a purpose. Number 2, using presets. Now, I don't use presets. I've been using all of these plugins and hardware for time immemorial. I know them inside out, but I have experimented with presets. I do love some presets on many different things when I'm starting to get to know a piece of equipment. But if you are going to use a preset as a beginner, let's just say, let's have a look. Okay, so let's go and grab a fancy compressor. This is Compressor Bank by Mac DSP. Great company. And let's go and see what defaults they've got. Artist presets, they've got Joe Barresi. It's great, obviously. They've got some drum stuff here. Like I said, they've got a drum bus, they've got an easy rider, gentle percussion, heavy hits, light touch. I think heavy hits might work because this is Kenny Enoff playing drums and he thwacks it. So not touching anything, just let's see what it sounds like. I haven't tried this before, especially not in a video. So let's see what happens. Okay. So it sounds like could be a drum parallel compressor. I mean, it's annihilating it. Super short attack. You know, and I love Mac DSP, but heavy hits just took me there. Well, let's play with a threshold and see if we can get it to do less. I'm going to bring the output down. Slow the attack down. All right, I think I got it to sound better. I think it sounds great now. It's actually quite usable. It's added a little bit more bite. I slowed down the attack, kept the release where it was, a little less compression. It was compressing 10-1. Now I've got it about 5.8-1, and I adjusted the threshold. Point is like, I'm fishing for something there, and I did all the work I would have done anyway if I'd opened it up. Then the other thing is even if you do find something really specific, let's say you find a compressor that says ultimate snare sound. I'm sure there's somebody that makes a compressor setting which says ultimate snare sound or best snare ever. I've seen all these things. We all have. The question is, the first thing you've got to do is make sure that you set up a threshold properly, because you don't know how they've set it. Have they set it so it's hitting the compression really hard to give you some massive spankiness? Is it supposed to only be hit by 2 to 3 dB? Is your source material recorded with a really, really spanky, really aggressive transient? Or is it the opposite and it's just a big blob of snare? You get what I'm saying. I like presets. They are fun to play with. They might give you an idea of something unusual. Like, I didn't know what that was going to do until I opened it up. That's fantastic. However, just because somebody as incredible as Joe Barresi, and God bless him, he's amazing, doesn't mean that necessarily what he's created for you is going to be exactly right for what you're doing, because he doesn't know source you're going to put through it and how it was recorded. These are just really good, great fun roadmaps that you can play with. But ultimately, learning your compressor, understanding how attack and release works, understanding how the threshold works, understanding all of those fun things and where to apply them is going to be 1,000 times better than using any preset. Just go to the presets when you want to have some fun. And as promised, the number one mistake that we do while using compression is this. Using compression. That's it. Game over. We're done. Thank you. Seriously, I know I went earlier and I said, make sure that you know why you're using your compressor. The reality is like, that's a big part of it. But the other part of it is like, what sound are you trying to emulate? When I think of all of the albums that I've worked on over the years and all the different mediums they've been recorded in, and also all of the incredible people that I've worked with that have had 40 or 50-year careers, and I've worked with many of them that have been doing this since the 60s. The compressor is a tool now in the digital world that we reach for very, very often. And it was used a lot in those days too. But they had a heck of a lot of other things helping that we don't always have access to. Let's start with the basics. The microphone. If you were recording in a top studio in London or New York or LA, making the albums that we all grew up listening to, those albums were recorded, think of the Beatles, with these big, beautiful tube microphones. And those big, beautiful tube microphones added second and third harmonics. They made everything sound thicker, weightier, and sparklier, and just made everything sound just a little bit better. And they went into really beautiful mic preamps, whether they be Neves or APIs or V72, Telefunkens, all of these, either tube or solid state with big fat transformers, and they all rounded off the transients yet again and added more harmonics. Some compressors, like the diode bridge compressors, for instance, that we will be talking about soon, added weight below 400 hertz as well, like big, fat, blooming, and all these harmonics down there. Then, of course, with all this compression going on the way in, they hit tape, and the tape rounded off all of those transients. So all of this stuff, distortion, saturation, rounding off of transients, extra harmonics, all of this stuff, and the compression part of it is a little piece of it. There's other things going on. I mean, the mic itself, the tape is so huge in that. So maybe, just maybe, the compressor is not the be-all and end-all. Maybe you need a few other things. Now, I just did something fun with that snare, but let's just reach back for the snare for a second. Give it a listen. I like it. But what about if we go along and grab something fun? And of course, it's the plugin we were talking about a week ago, the ODR1. It's a guitar distortion pedal. So let's bring the drive down to 0, keep the EQ set in the middle. Bypass it. Bring it back on. I've got more body on my snare. I've got more bite on the top. And best of all of the transient has been rolled in. So instead of my snare sounding small and going pink, 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 with this little fast transient, now it's all rounded off by the saturation created by the distortion. That's emulating all of these different processes we were talking about. So putting a compressor on it, even though it was fun, let's go back to the compressor. Turn it off. It's great, got a little louder, just output gain obviously. Got a little brighter, had a little bit more snap. Yeah, it's nice, I liked it. Let's put the saturation back on. It's just better. It's just better. It's doing all the things I want. And if I want to brighten it with a little bit of EQ, maybe a little bit more, maybe I could do that a little bit and get that brightness that I had on the other one. But I got all of that body and the transients rolled off. And the snare is going to be perceived to be louder without the use of compression because it's saturating all of those, all that low end and all that high end. So the question is, do you need to use a compressor? what is the sound you're trying to get? That doesn't sound like a fully distorted snare drum. It just sounds like a snare drum with more body and more bite and just more of everything. And it's done by using saturation. And you can use this plugin. You can use the free ones that come with your DAW. Lo-Fi for other Pro Tools users is amazing. There's all of these different tools, and compressors, as amazing as they are, shouldn't always be your first thought. And if you're trying to get that sound that you want to emulate of those great, great records we all grew up worshipping, quite frankly, remember they went through so many stages of bouncing and transformers and tubes and all of that kind of good stuff. And of course, bounce between tape onto tape, hitting it hard, getting the transient rolled off, then bouncing again to another 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch tape for the final mix, then being mastered again. I mean, so many processes. And we're trying to achieve all of that inside a box. So compressors, love them. They're great. They're fantastic. But know when you need to use them and why you need to use them. And remember, there are other ways to achieve the results that you want. Thank you ever so much for watching. That was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed that. Please leave any comments and questions below. Please let us know what tips and tricks you have for using compressors and what mistakes you have made yourself. Have a marvelous time. See you all again very, very soon.